The bustle of the hospital was a welcome distraction, as I opened my new patient's chart, and headed for her room. My son, Eric, had just brought home a disappointing report card, and my daughter, Shannon, and I had argued again, about her getting a driver's license. For the next 8 hours, I wanted to throw myself into helping people, who I knew, had much more to worry about, than I did. Rebecca was only 32, admitted for chemotherapy, after breast cancer surgery. When I entered her room, it took me a moment to spot her. Amid the bouncing forms of 3 giggling little girls, I told Rebecca I would be her nurse. And she introduced her husband, Warren, 6-year-old Ruthie, 4-year-old Hannah, and 2-year-old Molly. Warren coaxed the girls away from their mother, with a promise of ice cream, and assured Rebecca they would return the next day. As I rubbed alcohol on her arm, to prepare it for the intravenous line, Rebecca laughed nervously. "I have to tell you, I'm terrified of needles." "It'll be over before you know it," I said. "I'll give you a count of 3. Rebecca shut her eyes tightly, and murmured a prayer, until it was over. Then she smiled and squeezed my hand. "Before you go, could you get my Bible from the table?" I handed her the worn book. "Do you have a favorite Bible verse?" she asked. Jesus wept. John, chapter 11, verses 35. "Such a sad one," she said. "Why?" "It makes me feel closer to Jesus, knowing he also experienced human sorrow." Rebecca nodded thoughtfully, and started flipping through her Bible. As I shut the door, quietly, behind me, during the following months, I watched Rebecca struggle with the ravages of chemotherapy. Her hospital stays became frequent, and she worried about her children. Meanwhile, I continued to contend with raising my own kids. They always seemed either out or holed up in their rooms. I missed the days when they were as attached to me as Rebecca's little girls were to her. For a time, it had seemed Rebecca's chemotherapy was working. Then, doctors discovered another malignant lump. 2 months later, a chest X-ray revealed the cancer had spread to her lungs. It was terminal. "Help me to help her through this," I prayed. One day, when I entered her room, I found her talking into a tape recorder. She picked up a yellow legal pad and held it out to me. "I'm making a tape for my daughters," she said. I read the list on her pad: starting school, confirmation, turning 16, first date, graduation. While I worried how to help her deal with death, she was planning for her children's future. She usually waited until the early hours of the morning to record the tapes, so she could be free from interruptions. She filled them with family stories and advice, trying to cram a lifetime of love into a few precious hours. Finally, every item in her notes had been checked off, and she entrusted the tapes to her husband. I often wondered what I would say in her place. My kids joked that I was like an FBI agent, with my constant questions about where they'd been and who they'd been with. Where, I thought, are my words of encouragement and love? It was 3 o'clock one afternoon, when I got an urgent call from the hospital. Rebecca wanted me to come immediately, with a blank tape. What topic has she forgotten? I wondered. She was flushed and breathing hard. When I entered her room, I slipped the tape into the recorder and held the microphone to her lips. "Ruthie, Hannah, Molly, this is the most important tape." She held my hand and closed her eyes. "Someday your daddy will bring home a new mommy. Please make her feel special. Show her how to take care of you. Ruthie, honey, help her get your brownie uniform ready each Tuesday. Hannah, tell her you don't want meat sauce on your spaghetti. She won't know you like it separate. Molly, don't get mad if there's no apple juice. Drink something else. It's okay to be sad, sweeties. Jesus cried too. He knows about sadness and will help you to be happy again. Remember, I'll always love you." I shut off the recorder, and Rebecca sighed deeply. "Thank you, Nan," she said, with a weak smile. "You'll give this one to them, won't you?" she murmured, sliding into sleep. A time would come when the tape would be played for her children. But right then, after I smoothed Rebecca's blanket, I got in my car and hurried home. I thought of how my Shannon also liked her sauce on the side, and suddenly that quirk, which had annoyed me so many times, seemed to make her so much more precious. That night the kids didn't go out. They sat with me long after the spaghetti sauce had dried onto the dishes. And we talked, without interrogations, without complaints, late into the night.